been waiting for you.
Alan, you're having a nightmare.
That's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to scare anybody.
Don't you understand? You're a machine, Alan, a mechanical device. Is that straight enough for you?
I read you loud and clear.
Alan, you idiot.
Welcome to episode 21 of Green Crush. Just kidding. It's not episode 21. It's episode Christmas bonus. It's the Christmas episode, and I had to use the intro from episode 21 because somehow my audio interface that I use to complete the program and to build the theme and add on to it and sort of subconsciously tell a lot of the story. Some of the people are starting to figure it out. I know it's obscure, but it's fun to listen to. And it contains a lot of information. And there's a lot of hidden meanings in there, such as beginning and ending the show with references to the sitcom Get Smart from the 60s, because when you're talking about cannabis and legality, get smart. It's that simple. But anyway, I was putting together a new updated version of the theme to be discussed later, I suppose. And the whole program crashed on me. Not the computer, not some of the files in the computer, anything more than the actual interface. And for this is all my fault because I was using GarageBand. And now all the audio techs are laughing at me. But this isn't my forte. I was just using GarageBand. I'm okay with my box of crayons. I don't need to get into the laser pointer skill set of using Pro Tools, etc. But apparently now I do. So I'm trying to learn an in-between thing on that. I'm trying to learn Logic Pro 10, because I'm on a Mac. And please don't send me things about, you should be on a PC. I already know that. It's never going to happen. I tried that once for a year. And I'm not proud of it, but I'm a Mac guy, it turns out. So I'm going to have to say that I didn't really want to provide the theme. I did want to provide it, but not the chopped up, terrible, buggered up version that GarageBand has at the last minute afforded me. So that was the intro to another episode, and isn't that fun? So here it is, the bonus Christmas episode. Didn't know we were going to be doing a Christmas episode, but we're doing that instead of doing the next numbered episode. And that'll all be important later on for everybody, because this show is going to get much more interesting than it already has been. I've been told it is in the new year. And that means we're going to be covering some different things that I'm not at liberty to mention, but if the theme were ready for today, you would have heard all about it. So just as well that we're waiting until next year in just a couple of weeks, and we will take the break. Of course, this is coming at you on the 19th of December, 2017. That's the broadcast date originally, podcast, broadcast. And thank you for downloading us on iTunes and all the other cool places. And if you're downloading us on iTunes, see, this is where the cool music would play in the background, but I don't have my friend with me. At this point, I would say go to iTunes and review the show, and please don't base your entire review on this audio free show. I don't have any bonus perks for you. Not a lot of songs. I don't have Paul Flynn telling us to break the law. Don't have any of that. And that's okay, too. And so I could rail about this, and I was pretty upset when the entire program crashed, because that's 12 hours in the garbage. But I'm happy to know that this is the Christmas episode, so we're going to treat it like a Christmas present. And I am, anyway, that I was able to do this show at all. I'd like to once again shout out to Eggplant Digital Media for affording me this lovely space. And a look out onto Toronto's fascinatingly bizarre and eclectic King Street East. And here we are coming from 234 King Street East, the Pacific Junction Hotel. Once again, this is all brought to you by Eggplant Digital Creations, and also a shout-out to my broadcasting cohort. It's hard for me to call him that when he's been at this for a couple of decades or more. Mike Richards, who had me on his show way back in May of this year, 2017, to hear my story about my particular version of my journey through cancer And he was so impressed, and so were digital eggplant media, digital media were impressed enough. And so Dan Wong was also instrumental in this for putting the show on the air. They came at me pretty soon after I had spoken with Mike. So thanks to Mike, and thanks to Dan Wong, and thanks for the facility here. And they just rushed me in a lovely cup of coffee. That's so kind. Didn't even ask. Great place to do a show. And so this is more of a Thanksgiving for me than a Christmas celebration, but it's all the same thing really, isn't it? So cheers. And this show is going to be very much like the original, very first broadcast podcast of Green Crush. Green, of course, meaning cannabis. Crush, of course, meaning what cannabis can and does do to cancer. And when you keep hearing that it's not as helpful as it is, scroll back a few shows and listen to some earlier. Well, we've got 22 episodes behind us already, so there's a lot of information there. This was all designed in the first place because I would spend a lot of time explaining things to people one-on-one, deservedly so. People that really wanted to know, people in dire straits or loved ones of folks in dire straits, and so I just couldn't do it anymore, one-on-one, 5 hours at a time here and there. And so now we are, my team and I, Danny Mendlow, who is also the producer of this show, and Kim Sakamoto, now distant in her enclave in Western Canada. We've all blown apart for the end of the year, and but we've established a digital framework to keep our friendship and hopeful success with this show going. And I do this show to tell you how horrible it was for me, not for any kind of sympathy, as I've said earlier, and we will be recapping a lot of points that were made in the year, but I tell you this because if you just look at me and think I came down with the flu and managed to knock it off, that would be pretty impressive on its own, but my journey is that 4 years ago, I was diagnosed after a very terrible year, if you're just joining us, with stage 4 aggressive advanced prostate cancer that had already metastasized into much of my skeleton. So that hurts to sit down and to move your ankles and knees and all of the places where the bones are rotting away. As I say, like dropping a Tums into a ginger ale, but in slow motion. And when that happens to your bones, it's extremely uncomfortable, and obviously you're aware of the fact that you are dying. And then in my case, you have to listen to one of the best experts in the country tell you that there's no other option, and there's nothing that can be done, and I'm so sorry, and here's a palliative drug, and our chapel is just down the hall. And even if you're not of that faith, we can arrange someone for you. So rather than rely on faith at that time, I decided instead to chase down some facts, and it turns out that my doctor, one of the best in the country, I'm told, either had no idea about this or was ready to disparage the application of cannabis at any given moment, and actually recommended me not to take it despite having several months of vast improvement, nowhere near the death I was promised. And I tell him, hey, it's been 5 or 6 months now. You want to know why these numbers are so great? I can tell you that I'm using cannabis oil. I didn't want to mention it before. And what does he do? Take a guess. If you guess that he told me not to take it and that it was a bad idea, you are correct, which is ridiculous. So I needed to find out about how to get out of this problem, and there's been a lot of great people that have been helping me with the awareness of what's been going on. And some of the people helping me didn't even know me at the time, but there were these two people. One of them since has been a guest on the show, named Mark and Jody Emery. And Mark and Jody Emery have been at the forefront of the cannabis movement towards decriminalization. Unfortunately, they failed in their efforts, and it's recriminalization is what we are now undergoing with Justin Trudeau and his lapdog G20 rights abuser pig cop boss, who, some reason or other, for some reason or other, when they decided to legalize cannabis, and so using the word legalize makes people think, hey, this is going to be great now. This is going to be accessible. Or it's going to cause other people who are not fans of it to go, legal, this will be terrible. Everyone will have it. And both groups were wrong because they're not legalizing it. They are recriminalizing it. They are removing 7 or 8, a handful of laws that carry penalties now here in this country of Canada, where we're broadcasting from, and I'll get to other places around the world shortly, so please listen and understand it's a home time into the year show. So these folks were, the Emerys, were always trying to get this cannabis substance in an educative way out there and available to people who might not have known they have the freedom to do this just as much as they do to grow tomatoes or iceberg lettuce in their garden. So I thank the Emerys for taking on that effort and moving us towards the goal line of freedom to use a plant that grows outside. And unfortunately, Mark did this horrible thing one time, and that's what it was a terrible, awful thing that Mark did. What he did was, from Canada, he made available for sale seeds to this healthful, health-giving, life-giving food of a plant. And he was selling seeds to willing Americans who were exercising their alleged democratic freedom to buy these seeds. And he got arrested for it, did Mark. And so the American government at the time wanted to come after him. This is when Mr. Sunshine, Obama, was in charge. And they put Mark in jail. Now, this Stephen Harper fella used to run Canada, so to speak, on behalf of the Queen, the way Trudeau does now. And he sent Mark Emery to prison by sending him to the States, where they then incarcerated him. Now, I've come to learn later that Mark took advantage of this time to read and learn things and build up his intelligence arsenal even further than it was, and even share a lot of this information with some of the inmates down there. But you don't want to go to prison. And anyway, he came back to Canada eventually, and reunited with his wife eventually, who visited him, I don't know, dozens of times, I'm sure, over the 5 years, maybe more. And they had these charges against them that were all cannabis-related charges. And they recently had to go to court because when they were charged with these offenses, just understand, these offenses that they were charged with are now going to be the profit markers for a bunch of fat pigs, and by this I mean police, who have bought their way into cannabis distribution systems, and there are still some people suffering in their lives from the criminal record inflicted by idiot Julian Fantino. This police officer was a former chief of police of Toronto, a large city in Canada. And he's moved on now to partner with an RCMP officer, a high-ranking RCMP officer. This is the National Police Force of Canada, or one of them. And these two clowns are now going to profit from this company called Alifia. So, for the Christmas episode, I say be careful where you spend your cannabis money. There are so many licensed producers not worth a cup of spit in a monkey house at the zoo that's been hit by a typhoid wave. Not even a couple of them. These clowns are actually going to put out soon, in July 2018, unless the Senate has a sober second thought and shoots down this ridiculous House of Cards, Justin Trudeau, friggin' cop-built laws as possible. These guys are going to profit from a substance that Fat Julian now says, oh, you know what? No, it's a good thing. No, I heard about it. Somebody told me it was healthful, and so I want to make some money on it. Tough shit, old man. That is exactly the same excuse a lot of people could have used when you were arresting them and fucking up their lives. So why would you be able to profit? I will never lie down to this. I will never shut up about this. And I will never stop informing people who have no idea that the former police chief of Toronto, Julian Fantino, is now a purveyor of and a potential profiteer of cannabis. If you don't smell that this is completely upside down on its face, I don't know what more you need to know. I mean, do your own research. And I understand that I have a vested, biased interest in this. biased in that I use the product and my life is still here and I get to use it however I would like. So I'm biased in that way. I'm biased towards the success of the product, but these guys are still selling it as a symptomatic reliever as opposed to a potential curative. And I don't use the word cure. I use the word that I have changed the chemistry of my body enough to render it impossible for cancer to take hold. So choke on that a little bit, you team of FDA lawyers. Go figure that out. While I don't advise people on what they should do vis-a-vis cannabis and cancer, I never do that. I don't do that, and so I can't be charged with doing that. What I do is if I hear someone going on about what their medical problem is and they're looking for some kind of advice, I don't give it to them at all. What I tell them is, gee whiz, that sounds horrible. And if it were happening to me, here is what I would do. And this way it's not counseling. And this way it's just, what do you call it, folks? Anecdotal. The old anecdotal references. And we'll be coming up to why I understand that word to be a very, very good word as opposed to the very bad word that it has been made into being. So, okay, so we will be getting to a lot of things, and I will be, as my critics say, all over the map on this episode. And the Encyclopedia Britannica does not complain or feel sheepish about being well up on many subjects. So if you think that's the problem, then maybe you don't need this information and you can listen to something else right now, other than me drinking coffee. So now we're going to talk about some major issues this year. The year in review. This is the no guest, no sound effect, me talking for, I don't know, an hour, I guess. But it's all true, and I'm sure that if you apply these facts to your own life, yours can improve. I know that's what I would do. So I'm going to burn through this quickly. Given months to live with no options for conventional medical treatment, Alan was presented with the sole option of getting his personal affairs in order. Seeing cannabis all over the news and media, Alan researched every aspect of the famous leaf. Why the hate? Why the love? Alan insists it's very much worth looking at with fresh eyes that are occasionally bloodshot. 4 years later, and twice dragging himself off a guaranteed deathbed, Alan has learned that the big 3 doors into the cancer journey are not always available or effective. Those big 3 doors being chemotherapy, surgery, and radiation. He will help to reveal the well-hidden 4th door that has given him back his life and is proving to be an effective remedy for so many other ailments. That's what this show is about. So with this no tech, no fun, no guest kind of thing and straight to it and just me talking, like that hasn't happened on a podcast episode before, it's nice to reset the focus of the show. Okay, this isn't necessarily a party. And it's definitely not a stoner show, as you've heard by now. Not that there's anything wrong with that, as our friend Seinfeld would say. This is more of a truth blast on the grassy parameters of cannabis. And we do showcase in studio and call in guests from both sides of the fence. But a lot of these punks on the other side of the fence don't want to come on, do they, Julian? To explain your duplicity. Now, I don't want to just pick on Julian Fantino as a cop. When there's another cop at the top, Bill Blair. This guy, B-L-A-A-A-A-A-A-R-E. Billy Blair. Bill Blair. It's actually B-L-A-I-R, as in airhead. All right, this is the problem that I have not been able to fully get off my chest with these guys. How is it, and I've thought about this a lot, because what else are you going to do? How is it that when the decision is made in a country to legalize this substance, what is the logical construct that immediately says, oh, let's go to the police and see what they think about it. Let's put them at the number 1 position of consultation. Let's even put a former one of them. Once again, Bill Blair is the former police chief of Toronto, just like Julian Fantino. And don't tell me this guy's not already way the hell ahead of being invested into all of the companies that they have set up to be the legal purveyors, and everybody else is a criminal, and that's why Mark Emery and his wife have been found to be criminals who cannot vend anything cannabis related. I'm sure there's some tightening of the details I need to get there, but these guys cannot even sell anything legally in this new paradigm. Because in the old paradigm, when these cops that are profiteers set it all up, they arrested these people and gave them records. They arrested them and charged them under the old paradigm, and so now they've been fully sentenced and punished, something like $500,000 in debt, plus never being able to sell this stuff, while a bunch of cops can actually meter out and mete out justice as they see fit, using sobriety tests that have not been proven to be effective. Just because you've got cannabis in your system does not mean you are inebriated or intoxicated. Okay, so if you really want to pull some people over, set up your ride program outside of what are known to be famous police drinking bars, where they like to go tip a few pops and some other heavier stuff after work sometime. You never see a ride check outside one of those, huh? So these cops are consulted everywhere. It makes no sense. It's like if you said, okay, from now on, scuba diving is going to be illegal, and we're not going to have that anymore. Well, you wouldn't be consulting the scuba divers about it, would you? Because they would be the ones complaining about, being put out of business and not being allowed to partake of their activity because it's dangerous. And what about the brains? And what about the people with the potential bends and ruining their lives? And we can just put a series of laws around scuba diving. They're not going to consult scuba divers. And so when they legalize cannabis, or try to, how is it that they don't talk to people like me? And there are many of them. So you say you had cancer. Can we see the details from your doctor? So you say you use cannabis. Can you bring in that information, please? Let's take a look at this and fully understand the truth before we decide to draw up a series of cockamamie laws that are designed to restrict and impugn and chastise. Because we believe... We believe this stuff is no good. And we believe we are governing the best way we can. We believe. Well, I'm all past belief, okay? I'm right into experiential knowledge and actual truth. And this is why Kathleen Wynne, the Premier of Ontario, was happy to brush me off with nothing more than, well, I'm glad you noticed that the federal government's involved, and this is a conversation we'll continue to have, and blah, 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 and off she goes. Episode 19, check it out. And, of course, it's not going to have a continuing conversation. The continuing conversation is going to be going on with lots of people once they go to friggin' jail for breaking one of the 45 new laws about cannabis in this decriminalized as if world. Listen, when you're sitting down with police to understand, okay, you won't be able to bust people like this anymore, so you'll be able to bust people like this instead. That's not legalizing it. That's legalesing it. Putting a bunch of bullshit laws and words around something that doesn't give the freedom at all. It's just a bunch of hocus pocus and mirrors. But again, why are they doing this? Why are they going to the police? Why are they going that direction? Why don't they go to treatment centers? Why don't they go to therapy? Why don't they go to counseling instead? Why don't they put the money into there? And I'll tell you why it is. And I'd like to have a police officer, who's higher up, not a flatfoot, but a Mark Saunders of Toronto or a Julian Fantino, even though I've been rude to him. And I can't see that changing if he's going to remain a profiteer. By the way, ban and boycott Aleafia, Aleafia. Ban that. Don't sign on with them. Don't give that guy money when he took away so many people's freedoms. Don't do it. Find another way. Grow your own. Get your own plants. If they say 4, great, take 4. If you want 5 or 6, do 5 or 6. Don't hang your permission on these guys. But when Julian Fantino and Bill Blair and so many other police chiefs who knew this was coming and have absolutely, definitely, smartly, secretly, illegally invested in this paradigm well before it takes hold, following the Bronfman family template. I'll tell you why. One major reason why, and that is this. If you were able to go over the spreadsheet of expenses that is called the police budget, they always want more money and they always demand more money, and every politician that wants to do it a little bum pat suck tit police kind of thing what they'll do is they'll campaign like John Tory did so many times before he actually won out of attrition, basically. Anybody will look good after Rob Ford. These guys, whenever they run, they're saying, and if you vote for me, we'll hire more police officers and make this city even safer and blah, blah, blah. That's always on the agenda. We got to hire more cops. More cops need to be hired. That's just the way we have to be, according to these people who are not thinking about it correctly. And the reason they do that is because just do the math, as they say. And I'd like to get someone who is good at that kind of thing to pour over these numbers. But basically, I'll give you the shape of it. It's just common sense. So I realize that's not taught in school anymore, along with logic, which they removed, which makes these kinds of movements easy to do for the rulers of this bloody society. To say, oh, well, if we're eliminating this thing as a problem, then we'll have to make sure that the cops that used to bust people for it have even more to do, because if we don't, the budget will need to shrink. Once we tally up the man-hours of all the police officers who have had anything to do with arresting people for cannabis, and that includes the bust, the write-up, the smashing them around in the garage if they feel like it, as we now see regularly from hidden cameras all over the place, being released, of abusive police behavior. It's not localized to one force or one city. It's a mentality, okay? And it's a good way to earn 80, 90, 100 grand a year, whatever it is, without having to have the intelligence above 100 on the IQ scale. So you can see how it's attractive. But the main thing is this. If you tally up the man hours, or the people hours, the workforce hours of everybody involved with arresting people for cannabis, any charge at all, and you tally that up, you are going to need fewer man hours worked into your budget, and therefore you are going to undermine your ability and your need to ask for a budget increase and to ask for a personnel hiring blitz. When they always need to bring in more cops, there's never enough cops. And it's just simple math, and you won't hear this on AM 640 or any other kind of talk show mainstream thing where they're selling mattresses and underwear. Okay, this is so far it's a sponsor-free effort. We had a licensed producer glom onto us, a couple of really nice representatives, and just while I was signing the paperwork, with a skeptical kind of a feeling, because I don't want to be controlled in what I say, but just as I was signing the paperwork, apparently the vice president of this company told these folks to pull the rug on the plug underneath me because they didn't want me shitting all over licensed producers, which is easy to do. But anyway, back to the point. These cats take up a certain amount of man hours busting people. Now, I know there's some people on the drug squad that only do hard drugs, etc., but look at all the police officers who have been pretty much spending hours at a time for the last couple of years just getting rid of and arresting all of these licensed producers. Sorry, not the licensed producers, the dispensaries in and around Toronto, all through the Kensington area, everywhere. They've shut it all down because it's illegal. It's not the law. And meanwhile, when it was the law, they arrested people, and now they're changing the law, and the same people that were busting the people before and giving them criminal records are now going to profit from it? This is the balanced thinking of an alcohol-driven mind, folks. So it's just a numbers thing. They are shitting their pants that ultimately this stuff is so great medicine. This stuff is so great food, improving the health of the people. This stuff is so a great boon to the economy if left unalone. And you don't put people in jail for using something that is their right and their choice. How dare you assume that you can tell me what I can and cannot put into my body? Just provide me with a decent education. I will bolster it myself, and I'll know not to drink bleach and smoke 100 joints at a time. And we'll learn how to use this allegedly dangerous substance properly, thanks, instead of you just sitting on the side of, oh, it can do this bad thing and it could do that bad thing, like everything else that's available in society. How many people do you think they were thinking of would be killed or injured when they first allowed people to drive around in cars? Do you think at the time if they said, yeah, this will blossom into a huge industry once they get going and different companies get into it, and eventually you're not even going to believe the hundreds of thousands of people that are going to be killed Yeah, sure, let's get right on that. They never would have said that. And then it's all about traffic and learning how to drive and understanding how to use a tool properly. And when you do, you have far less chance of getting injured or damaged driving a car because you've learned how to do it. There's your education. You learn how to do it. You experience the use of it. And you don't need somebody telling you forever and ever for the rest of your life, well, we can't have you driving a car. That wouldn't be good. What if you got into an accident? These are dangerous. They've killed people before. Why should you have one? It's the same logic as telling people they can't use this fabulous tool of cannabis that I have used like a tool, like a toolbox. I have researched how it works, and I sit here now before you laughing at my previous death sentence. My painful, meditative, depressing, scary, sad, shitty time withering on the vine, laboring under the misconception that there was no help for me because some expert said so. And now I'm an expert. Expert enough to run my own life, thanks, which I earned, thanks. And I will never back off of my means to do this, even if some drunk face. That's the thing about Bill Blair, right? When you look at this guy, you go, oh, he's clearly an alcoholic. Look at the face on this guy. Pull him over. Let's test him. Let's have him blow. And let's check his stock portfolio from well before, folks, they passed these laws. Let's see how he's doing financially. And if we now know that this substance is so dangerous, as they say, I guess that explains why a Toronto officer from a few weeks ago, who was on the drug squad, died from an OxyContin overdose. And I said at the time, when this came up, I mentioned on the show, a police officer who has spent his time in the drug squad busting people for cannabis dies of an OxyContin overdose? No comment. I said that before at the time because if I say what I really think, people are going to think that's hateful. But it's more karma. Whether you believe in the concept of it or not, you can understand the definition. And while the Emorys are doing time, or where Mark was doing time, and the Emorys have been stuck in Toronto, which is never a fun thing if you have to be here, and waiting for what came out the other day. So let's get to that. The Mark Emery case, you understand these police, we don't need as many cops if this thing is genuinely legal. The only thing we need, why don't we put some money in some inspectors so we can send them into the LPs because so many of them have toxins and poisons and bullshit. And this company Organigram crowing about some new financial improvement that they've just experienced after recently being caught with pesticides and claiming, oh, well, we didn't know that was in there. We're so sorry. If your name is Organigram, derived, I assumed, from the word organic, what the fuck have you even got any pesticides in-house for anyway? And these are the people that the government of Canada says we have to deal with because the dispensary folks are criminals. This thing is so topsy-turvy that you just need to take down about 15 or 20 facts and you could be just as knowledgeable as you need to be, instead of most people who I speak with at times say, oh yeah, so cannabis is legal next year. Hey, wow, I didn't think that would happen. Well, that's good. And no, it's not, because they're doing it wrong. And this whole faulty logic of, okay, well, just let them put the laws up and we'll fix it later, is so stupid. Nobody would do that in the field of construction. And you are constructing a paradigm here. So I'm tired of that report, even from alleged people that agree with me and friends of mine in the same circle that speak about these things. They say this ridiculous, well, at least it's legal and, then we'll be able to... if there's problems with it, we can fix it later. Like the government is ever interested in fixing it in our... If there was any evidence of that, they wouldn't have turned to the cops in the first place. But that's the gig, folks. The cops needed to protect themselves. The cops and the Police Chiefs Association and the union of the police officers, they don't want fewer cops in-house. And it all becomes a political issue. And it all becomes part of conspiracy, which means nothing more than people getting together making plans that you're not privy to. So stop telling me how that's not a thing either. Jesus Christ. All right, so Here are the Emery's, pot activists, still calling it pot. This is the CBC. If you look me up on the internet and put the word CBC beside my name, letter C, BC, you'll see that I had a history with these folks, and they will not touch me now. I had an interview on the November 20th Kathleen Wynne Town Hall with a CBC reporter who was very excited to hear about all of this, as was his cameraman, a prostate cancer sufferer himself. We had a 20-minute conversation, 10 minutes of it filmed. He was so excited to get it on the news that night. And, of course, in the morning, I was able to text him and say, so you didn't get it on the news last night? He said, no, they wanted to go ahead with the straight story. And the story being the premier of the province had a town hall last night and fielded a lot of complaints from the voters. That was apparently more interesting and newsworthy than a former star on one of our television shows claims he got stage 4 cancer and then claims he reversed it by using cannabis and now has confronted the premier directly. Was less interesting, apparently. So I get it. Nobody wants to talk to me about it. That's fine. Fuck you. I'm coming anyway. Polish off your 2018. We got all kinds of plans, and I'm not stopping. Pot activists Mark and Jody Emery plead guilty, sentenced in drug-related court case. The Emerys, arrested in Toronto in March, were fined $195,000 for operating illegal dispensaries. Prominent pot activists Jody and Mark Emery pleaded guilty to a number of drug-related charges in a Toronto court, which fined them $195,000 each. The pair also received 2 years probation and cannot participate in the running of illegal marijuana dispensaries. And once again, the illegal ones are the ones that Justin didn't license, the ones that the cops don't control. So fuck Alethea and anything Bill Blair has to say. The pair also received 2 years probation and cannot participate in the running of illegal marijuana dispensaries. Well, theoretically, no one could participate in the running of illegal marijuana dispensaries, but then we're hanging back on the word illegal. And the word illegal should not mean, I'm going to do this and get away with it, and you're not allowed to. That's not what it should mean. So 3 others charged in the case also sentenced to pay fines, but 17 more had their charges withdrawn as part of a deal, Emery said. Mark Emery, the self-proclaimed Prince of Pot, pleaded guilty to possession of marijuana for the purpose of trafficking marijuana, and possession of proceeds of crime of more than $5,000. I even offered to go to jail for a year. That's what he says, or she says. Hang on. Jody Emery pleaded guilty to possession of marijuana for the purpose of trafficking and possession of proceeds of crime over $5,000. What exactly will you call the profit marker of Alethea? Or one of these other purveyors? Why will that now be legal because someone had a pen and someone talked to a magistrate or a judge? Why would that be different? These are the paradigms that we need to shatter. This is all bullshit. All other charges against the Emerys were dropped, and the judge accepted a joint recommendation for sentencing the couple. Each must pay $150,000, plus a $45,000 victim surcharge, and spend 2 years probation with conditions to keep the peace and be of good behavior, and not to participate directly or indirectly in any illegal marijuana dispensaries. So Mark said that he thinks the fine is extraordinarily high. I wish I could help him out. But he's right, it is. Jody Emery told the judge she knew she was doing an illegal thing, but was hoping in the future it would be legal. We thought we could make a really big impact on what legalization should look like, she says. The federal government set to legalize recreational marijuana in July 18, but the sale left up to the different provinces. So here's a bunch of folks that brought this stuff into my focus and awareness, and I was able to turn my life around because I used this. I used to smoke it recreationally a long time ago, and I don't recommend that back then or now. It was just something I chose to do, and you didn't have any right to tell me not to, and I gave it up. And then when I needed it for medicine, I'm happy to get back on it. I don't need to ask some cop who used to bust people for this, and now he says it's okay provided you get it from an agency of the government. So I'd like to throw a shout out to a fireman buddy of mine who I haven't seen in a while, but I know him to be a good guy. And he contacted me the other day to ask me that a guy at work has cancer, and the doctors gave him 1 year. And he's looked into Rick Simpson oil, and they say it might work. This is a letter I got. I'm just making it obscure because I'm not going to give up the guy's name. And so this gentleman was asking me if I could send him the best link of me telling my story, and he wants to send it to this guy. So I sent him a little info truth blast that I have all of these episodes, and my time on Coast to Coast with Richard Syrett, also on Richard Syrett's Conspiracy Show, late Sunday nights in Toronto, AM 740 rather. And I put together what I call a truth blast, and I sent it to him. And he says, thanks, that my research is saving lives. His whole department is getting the email. All of these firemen in this particular department are going to get this email. And they always have they can always ask me what I would do if I were in their situation, because I will not be caught counseling anyone. But firemen are pretty cool. You ever notice how they don't consult firemen about this either? They don't consult firemen. They just consult police. So anyway, let's get to some further gripes and grievances, shall we? I'm enjoying some coca leaf today. This is also illegal, apparently. But tough shit. So let's get to this next piece here. No. I don't want to read that one right now. Okay, yeah, here's a problem. So in California, let's turn there for a minute. Let's take our stateside focus into view. Got some time left. We've got lots of time left. Is California's weed market ready for legalization after a year of wildfires? So down in California, where it's always been fantastic, the huge fires there have devastated many of the growing operations, and they don't know if there will be enough or if the prices will shoot up. So this is from Fast Company. It's a 7-minute read, so we're not going to do the whole thing. But Peter Pietrangeli received the dire news in the early morning of October 9th. One of a dozen-plus wildfires spreading across Northern California was closing in on his Marin County cannabis farm. Pietrangeli, CEO of Acme Elixirs, I love that name, a cannabis oil and edibles company. That would be illegal in Canada, don't you know? Because there's a different law. Oh, my God. So some people can use these liquids and some people can't. Amazing. It's so full of shit. Anyway, these guys operate several marijuana growing facilities in Northern California. And they rounded up a group of volunteers and working as ash fell like rain around them, began harvesting each of his towering plants and moving them by truck to an empty storage container on a nearby cannabis farm where he hoped they would be safe from fire and smoke damage. After a week of 18-hour days, Pietrangeli was ready to celebrate with a margarita and a long night's sleep. That's when he got the call. Flames were heading for another one of his grows in Santa Cruz Mountains. So what's going on is, a lot of fires, a lot of crazy fires where I've seen some fires inside of a tree, some really intense heat there coming from somewhere, doing a lot of damage. So now this dude had to run off to his other grow up. And you can look at this on fastcompany.com. Good, interesting website. Got a lot of tech in there. And understand that the supply in California may be either too much money or not enough available or a bit of both. That sucks. Because they have another issue with contaminants. Contaminants of the weed. So while that's always a problem, let's get to this. The WHO, not the band, but the World Health Organization is telling us via Forbes.com, you know those guys. This is all mainstream stuff, folks. I can find this all over the net, but I always try to bring it to you in a mainstream capacity because otherwise people think it's not true. And I also want to comment while I'm looking for this particular URL here that there was a woman commenting last week about my attire, about how it was so Canadian for a guy to wear a turtleneck and a necktie. And I don't know if that's Canadian at all. I just wound up wearing a turtleneck that day, and I always wear a tie, except for today, because today is the Christmas show, and it felt a little too formal. I wear the tie so you know I'm telling the truth. Here is Forbes.com, and it's brand new. And you know, if this kind of information were observed instead of ignored by our alleged rulers, queen tools I call them, queen tools in Canada and the Commonwealth, if the Queen wants it, that's what's happening, from tax money on down. Anyway, the World Health Organization report. Now remember, these are the people always telling you to get your flu vaccine and your Zika vaccine and all of these things, so you have to believe them all the time. The WHO report finds no public health risks or abuse potential for CBD. This is one of the components, cannabidiol, inside cannabis that helps heal you. They have found no adverse health outcomes, but rather several medical applications for CBD, despite U.S. federal policy being a cannabinoid chemical and therefore a bad thing for which you can go to jail. The facts don't line up with the strictures from the assholes. Okay, that's the simple equation right there. The liars, the ones on the take. According to a preliminary WHO report published this month, naturally occurring CBD, that's the kind that grows in the plant, you know, this God-given plant, or wherever plants come from, just the same as a fern or a rose or a peach or a tomato. Okay, get over yourselves. It's safe and well tolerated in humans and animals and is not associated with any negative public health effects. Will this be part of the education program, Kathleen Wynne? Will this be what we are telling the young children about the dangers of this stuff? Is this the deal? Is this what we're after? Well, at this point, I would like to send the floor over. I got to take a bit of a break here, but you're not. I'm going to put you in touch with Don Davies. Don Davies, I'm going to have him talk a little bit and say some things that actually make sense about cannabis. Now, this is a politician speaking the truth about cannabis, so he's probably in a group of 15 or 20 around the world. So here's, make sure that's not too loud. Here's Don Davies getting up in the House and discussing the Cannabis Act legalization bill, which is nothing more than a recriminalization bill. And here's what the opposition had to say about this ridiculous series of laws. So we'll give Don some time here, and we'll be right back.
Vancouver, Kingsway. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when the Liberals promised Canadians cannabis legalization last election, I think that reasonable Canadians understood legalization to mean the end of criminalization, the end of stigmatization, and the end of the prohibitionist approach to cannabis. That's why I, along with millions of other Canadians, was somewhat surprised to read the fine print of Bill C-45, only to discover that this isn't legalization at all. It's just making cannabis less illegal. This legislation creates a litany of new cannabis-related criminal offences, most of which carry a maximum sentence of up to 14 years in prison. As renowned criminal defence attorney Michael Spratt put it, Bill C-45 is an unnecessarily complex piece of legislation that leaves intact the criminalization of marijuana in too many circumstances. An adult who possesses 30 grams of marijuana in public is a criminal. A youth who possesses more than 5 grams of marijuana is a criminal. An 18-year-old who passes a joint to their 17-year-old friend is a criminal. An adult who grows 5 marijuana plants is a criminal. This continued criminalization is inconsistent with a rational and evidence-based criminal justice policy and will only serve to reduce the positive impacts of the bill, end quote. Now, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health has claimed that these harsh penalties are reserved for, quote, some gangster in a stairwell, end quote, selling cannabis to children. But this is exactly the sort of reefer madness rhetoric that has fueled prohibition for nearly a century. The evidence before the Health Committee was directly contrary to this view. In fact, 95% of cannabis producers and consumers in this country are nonviolent, law-abiding citizens who have nothing to do with organized crime whatsoever. Indeed, if criminalization and the threat of imprisonment prevented people from using cannabis, then Canadians wouldn't be consuming an estimated 655 metric tons of it every year, when we have full criminalization and life sentences for trafficking. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, the prohibitionist approach has been repeatedly discredited by its failures throughout history. Cannabis consumption has increased steadily throughout the so-called war on drugs, and Canadian youth consume cannabis at some of the highest rates in the world today. Of the 4.6 million people the Parliamentary Budget Officer projects will use cannabis at least once in 2018, nearly 1.7 million, or more than one-third, would be in the 15 to 24 age group. And for far too long, we've wasted billions of dollars in resources in the criminal justice system by criminalizing otherwise law-abiding citizens at an alarming rate for simply processing and consuming cannabis. In fact, Mr. Speaker, we still are. According to Statistics Canada, in 2016, under the Liberal government, after they promised Canadians legalization, the most recent year of available data, there were 55,000 offences related to cannabis reported to police, and police charged 17,733 people with pot possession. Given that cannabis possession will soon be made legal in Canada, the NDP has been clear from the outset that we should immediately decriminalize the possession of recreational cannabis for personal use pending full legalization.
But no, that's not what they're going to do. That's not what they're going to do at all. They're going to bust everybody. So wait till July 2nd rolls around and these fat cats start taking people to court all over again. There are going to be problems. Oh, it's not fair. What happened to my husband? And there's going to be things all over the news, and it's going to clog up the court system, and none of these people are going to care. Not at all, because they're going to be profiting from it. So it's kind of hard to believe that this is the shit that we have to deal with on a regular basis. But it is a fact. And so thank you, Don Davies, for trying. I'm not a fan of any one particular party per se, but I sure do like that, some people know what's going on. And even if they're not getting to, even if they're not going to be somebody that's forming the policy itself. We could be like Norway here. Norway, of course, is planning to decriminalize drugs in a historic vote to become the first Scandinavian country to decriminalize as it focuses on treatment rather than punishment. Hey, let's try that for a change. Too much of a profiteering model here, though, on punishment. You get prisons, and you need to keep those people employed. And the prison guard unions are almost always lobbying for the continued illegalization of cannabis. So the whole thing's a friggin' scam. You just basically have to excise yourself mentally and possibly physically from these vipers, this net, this spider web. Majority of the Norwegian parliament, the Storting, as they call it, backed the historic shift which was supported by the Conservatives, the Liberals, the Labour Party, and the Socialist left. They directed the national government to reform its policies on drugs. Sveinung Stensland, deputy chairman of the Storting Health Committee, told Norwegian publication VG, "It is important to emphasize that we do not legalize cannabis and other drugs, but we decriminalize." So I guess they don't have a bunch of fat cops on the take over there who used to bust people and now are disgustingly riding out their twilight years by profiting. It's so disgusting. I can't stop talking about it. The change will take some time, but that means a changed vision. I've been talking about that on the show. It's all about your perception and understanding. A changed vision in Norway. Those who have a substance abuse problem should be treated as ill and not as criminals, with classical sanctions such as fines and imprisonment, like over here in Canada, the United States, and so many places around the world. Nicholas Wilkinson, the SV party's health spokesman, told the VG the VG publication, that Parliament's goal was to stop punishing people who struggle, but instead give them help and treatment, or put them in jail, like these pigs over here. Friggin' astounding. So I do have a picture of Julian Fantino, and I do find it nauseating, and I am going to click it away. There we go. What else have we got here? I'm just looking through. I'm just looking through the second thing that's a problem for California. Oh, my goodness. Like, it's not bad enough they have the fires. Organigram of Canada is also a purveyor of, or was trying to be, or didn't realize they were, a purveyor of poison pot. California's first batch of legal cannabis may contain pesticides due to lack of safety regulations, a.k.a. the free market. So, I mean, I've been hearing about California and how great it is that they have weed, but where is it coming from where it's any good, where it's not getting burned down or poisoned or both? So this is another problem. This is recreational cannabis hitting the shelves of retail establishments on January 1st, apparently, but testing firms are warning customers that the first crop was grown without safety regs. As a result, the state's inaugural batch of fully legal pot may be have greater levels of pesticide, mold, or contaminants than pot grown in more strictly regulated states like Oregon and Colorado. So Oregon and Colorado seem to have their thing together, but California is not in good shape, or so it seems. And I was going to have a lawyer on today from California who I was going to be on their show last week, and somehow that fell through, and then they were supposed to be on this show this week, having agreed to this weeks ago. So those pot brothers are not coming on this year. And maybe we can get them to come around some other time, or maybe I'll be less interested in carrying forth with someone that says they're going to do something they don't. So the federal prohibition of marijuana in the United States prevents government agencies from establishing nationwide regulations on cannabis cultivation. Now there's some more bullshit from you, this time in the red, white, and blue variety. At one extreme, California's lax safety regs up to this point have made it easier for entrepreneurs to break into the industry at the possible expense of consumers who may be inhaling pesticides or mold. So let's get ethical with this game, folks, okay, while we're here. In California, you got some socks to pull up, man. Got to figure out why those fires are happening, or make sure you grow your stuff elsewhere, and when you get it, make sure it's not poisoned. Now, as we slide into the tail end of the show, we're getting close to whatever it is, the end of things of this particular show. We've talked about the Emery's. Now, the government of Canada, like I said, they have these licensed producers, and these are the people that we have to deal with, and we have to purchase our, so they say anyway. And as I said, so many of them have had problems. We've had problems with this Metrum company, M-E-T-T-R-U-M, Metrum. They've got a shitstorm going on that people don't maybe know about or care about or are interested in, but it's just an option. One of the main purveyors, just an option to put out a weed that isn't suspect. But of course, Metrum didn't do that. Let's pull that up, and that'll be easy. That'll be right at the top of Google. What's the problem with Metrum? This is another licensed purveyor of cannabis, recommended to us and told we must purchase from the Canadian government because anything else is dangerous, even though we don't have any dispensary problems, and nobody complaining about that. Yeah, so Metrum voluntarily decided to recall, because you have to do it voluntarily. I mean, you know, otherwise you're really a bad guy. They're voluntarily recalling medical cannabis products that were exposed to a foliar plant spray that contained traces of an ingredient that they're not supposed to have in there. Just like Organigram. And they still irk me the most just because of their name. So, yeah, but the company says there's no impact on human health or the integrity of the product. Of course not. That's why they're recalling it. It's like they're talking to a bunch of idiots. So that's Metrum for you. They got into trouble. And there's a few others. You know, there's a few others. There's one company that I know of that doesn't have a scandal, and they're the company that wanted to take us on in the first place and then changed their mind at the last minute. Okay, so I'm not going to mention their name because I don't want to plug them and I don't want to hurt them. But I do want to hurt anybody else that's making this mess. Anyway, so we will get to this next problem. And we've talked about opioids a lot on the show. It turns out in a lot of places, as we found out from Maurice Cohen, that that was a guest a couple of shows ago, and our guest on the last show, who was quite an expert on a lot of things, all things cannabis and more, and all kinds of the archives. We talk about this opioid problem and the opioids that have damaged people's lives by being stuck on them. Somehow that has dropped. The use of it has dropped. The addiction rate has dropped in states where it's legal. And I don't know why they can't just arrest these people for procuring it and distributing it like they do with the allegedly dangerous pot that isn't from the dispensaries, while they go ahead and allow these other larger companies to poison us with their shit. And on that note, these two stories are now intertwined. As an OxyContin creator expands into the Canadian pot industry. Oh my God, here we go. This is from the Globe and Mail newspaper, or whatever they call themselves these days, media outlet. When Emblem Cannabis Corporation was cleared by the federal government to sell medical marijuana in August, that's Justin and Bill and all of those people. I'm sure this portfolio has a lot of thin blue line investors, shall we say. The company set out to attract new investors, vowing to change the face of the industry. In company materials, Emblem touted the wealth of experience its top executives brought to the fold, particularly in its pharmaceutical division. The man in charge of that business, John H. Stewart, not to be confused with the comedian, although he is one with this pitch, was a veteran of the drug industry, having spent close to 4 decades in key roles at one of the world's biggest pharmaceutical companies. His successes, Emblem said, include launching 11 new products, in particular one blockbuster drug that made his former employer billions of dollars, and billions of dollars spent on the public tit to help people addicted to this stuff of OxyContin. Mr. Stewart, purveyor of this particular sad story and profiteer thereof, was now bringing that expertise to Emblem, which planned on revolutionizing cannabis consumption with prescription tablets and capsules that would dramatically expand Emblem's sales. See, that's the main thing. Let's expand the sales of a company by taking natural cannabis and forcing it into a friggin' pill. I know a comedian who used to have a joke on having pot pills at a party. And that was a joke back then because there was nothing as ridiculous. But now cannabis is going to be sold by people in the pharmaceutical industry, because if they were rallying against it before, now they've found a way to synthesize it into a fucking pill so you can take it like the rest of their shit. And it'll have pesticides in it, and it won't be organic, and so on. A decade ago, when Stewart was president of Purdue Pharma Canada, coroners and public health officials were beginning to ring alarm bells over abuse of OxyContin, a highly addictive painkiller. Why the hell is this guy in charge of one of the major sanctioned governmental supply outlets of cannabis? Get on the phone, call your MP. When he later became chief executive officer and president of Purdue's U.S. parent in 2007, it was only a month after the U.S. company agreed to pay the U.S. government more than $634 million to settle allegations that it was fraudulently misbranded OxyContin as being less dangerous than it was. And now this cock is going to wade into the cannabis game. Unbelievable. OxyContin, now seen as the flashpoint of an opioid crisis, I guess so. That's the same way Coca-Cola is at the head of any kind of a cola crisis, has swept across the continent, killing hundreds of thousands of people in Canada. Not one person has died from a dispensary, Justin Trudeau. You smiling monkey, enjoying Aga Khan's birthday as some kind of an event while you're partying in the Bahamas for free or on the public tit last year. This guy is a major patriarch of opioid drugs, which means he is a purveyor of death and a substandard product. And you are going to give this guy one of the major licenses to provide legal cannabis in this country? It's a good thing I said country, right? Good thing I kept going with that. OxyContin is the flashpoint of an opioid crisis that swept across the continent, killing hundreds of thousands of people in Canada and the States, and touching off a chain reaction of addictions to other drugs such as fentanyl, and this guy's going to be a legal purveyor. This is fucking amazing to me. And this is not even new information for me. I'm just having a tough time metabolizing it. Many of those killed after taking OxyContin were not initially addicts or abusers, but became dependent on them after being prescribed the drug by their doctor upon complaining of pain. In 2013, lawmakers began asking new questions about what the company based in Stamford, Connecticut knew about the growing opioid crisis and how its own marketing tactics directed toward doctors may have fueled the problem. You think? You think the guys prescribing it and putting it out there and the companies might be actually the criminals in this venture rather than growing a plant outside your friggin' house without some weasel coming by and telling you that you're in trouble and being a bad person? Wealthy from his days at Purdue, where he retired 3 years ago, so he's not rich enough. Mr. Stewart has invested $1 million of his own money, this will be a philanthropist kind of thing, into a new company, one of 36 medical marijuana producers licensed by the feds. Emblem is now seeking to promote cannabis as an alternative to prescription painkillers and profit from the opioid crisis Purdue was instrumental in creating. Talk about the Hegelian dialectic. Here, let's provide a disastrous addiction for people, and then let's also be at the forefront of taking care of that addiction later on, and we'll profit at both ends. So I'm kind of done with this shit. Soon after receiving its license from Health Canada, this is the Canadian version of the FDA, Emblem took to its Twitter account to extol the virtues of cannabis over the prescription opioids that made Purdue one of the richest companies in the world. Medical cannabis, Stewart's new company said, could save us from painkillers. The opioid explosion. You don't get a better example of double-dealing criminal assholes than something such as that. You just cannot. You cannot. So, I'm telling you, I really am going to try to rally some people together in the new year. Like, people have to stop just sitting back and saying, okay, whatever. It's really a pain in the fucking ass right now, I'm telling you. Because this is just a stupid game that there's criminal partakers on the one side and mostly people who aren't really paying attention on the other side because maybe they don't need it yet or maybe they haven't come across this as a source of health and turning your life around like I have. So I'm way invested into the research, and the average person understandably doesn't know enough about this scam that's been put together by funding Trudeau into existence with far too many funds in the first place from Stephen Bronfman, who is the helm and at the leader of the Bronfman family. And if you look them up, as I have done, you will see that in Dope Inc., the control of liquor flow into Prohibition USA gave the Bronfman family literally life and death control over American crime. Refusing to play ball with the Bronfman gang usually spelled death, and independently minded gang bosses were often known to be executed by their lieutenants on the Bronfman's behalf. One of the buyers best liked by the gang was New York City beer baron Arthur Flagenheimer, a.k.a. Dutch Schultz, who succeeded in wiping out his competition, including the notorious killer Legs Diamond. Schultz himself was later rubbed out when he took it into his head to murder the reforming New York District Attorney Thomas Dewey. In the first years of Prohibition, Ekeel's four boys ran all bootlegging from the prairie states of Canada to major distribution sites like Chicago. Why am I saying this? This is all from Dope Inc. This spells out the history of the Bronfman family, and I say they're up to it again. Take a look at the Paradise Papers and Stephen Bronfman. Take a look at the fact that Justin Trudeau said, yeah, no, he's good with everything Steve did, his buddy, that helped put him over the top and win an election so he could get into position to set all this shit up and profit from it. They don't give a shit about your health. They need to control your health. This is one of the major things they want to control. Giving up your own sovereignty and awareness. Use your hospital, use your doctor to find out all the facts. But turn somewhere else for the remedy. Is what I would do. In the years of Prohibition, the first years, Ekeel's, this is Ekeel Bronfman's, four boys ran all bootlegging from the prairie states of Canada to major distribution. The Bronfmans also brought up sketches of barren farmland. The Bronfmans also bought up stretches of barren farmland along the border and even built an underground pipeline to pump their chicken cock into the United States. This is a kind of booze down there that was highly suspect, made with cheap, awful products meant to simulate Johnny Walker, that kind of thing. During these early years, the Bronfmans were scarcely under the protective wing of their sponsors. Thus, for example, in 1932, Bronfman brother-in-law Paul Matoff, not Madoff, but Matoff, was executed gangland style by the Chicago mob in a dispute over profit splitting. A scandal ensued, public hearings were convened, and the Bronfman crimes came spilling out into the light of day. The Bronfmans received a mild reprimand from the Canadian government and relocated their operations to Montreal. So it goes, folks. Get yourself a copy of Dope, Inc. Inc. It's free online. It's Dope Inc. Great read. Fantastic stuff. All true. Far more than any kind of mainstream thing you're going to find anyway in the history of this particular family. The Bronfman gang, best known to Americans for owning Seagram's, the biggest liquor company in North America at one point. And now they're just using the old family template to take down all the profits and anybody else saying that this stuff is as healthy as it is. So yeah, we've got a bit of a problem there. That's definitely a problem there, because this guy is actually going to, this opioid guy thinks he's going to run things, thinks he's going to be one of the major licensed purveyors, and I guess he is. Having a little chaga right now, a little chaga chai. This is also good for cancer. It's chai, it's chaga, it's good for you. Fermented chaga chai. Delicious chaga chai. Listen to it as it goes down my throat. Okay, folks, this is the Christmas show. Let's spend a little bit of time celebrating, shall we? For the folks that believe in Christmas and what it is, it's coming right up real soon. Let's go to abc.net.au. This is from Australia. This is from a few years ago, I think, 2012, but it's still valid because we're talking about an annual event. A debaucherous festival, that's what it is. Absolutely a debaucherous festival. That's what we're looking forward to. A little bit of debauchery, right? We want to have that when we're talking about the end of the year event. Saturnalia. Of course, that's what we're talking about. Saturnalia, which has become Christmas and mutated into Christmas. Once again, as a paradigm shifts from one to the other. So, yeah, of course, here we go. From Britannica.com, the most popular of Roman festivals dedicated to the Roman god Saturn. You know, like the Nike swoosh. The festival's influence continues to be felt throughout the Western world. You know, like on just about every logo. Originally celebrated on the December 17th, Saturnalia was extended first to 3 and eventually 7 days. The date has been connected with the winter sowing season, which in modern Italy varies back and forth. That's why it was different back then. But the influence of the Saturnalia upon the celebrations of Christmas and New Year's has been direct. The fact that Christmas was celebrated on the birthday of the unconquered sun gave the season a solar background connected with the kalends of January. January 1, the Roman New Year, when houses were decorated with greenery and lights and presents were given to the children and the poor. Concerning the gift candles, the Romans had a story that an old prophecy bade the earliest inhabitants of Latium send heads to Hades and phota to Saturn. The ancient Latins interpreted this to mean human sacrifices, but according to legend, Hercules advised using lights, not human heads. So there's always misinterpretation, isn't there? As we understand, people make mistakes all the time. They don't really dive into the data. They choose to ignore one side of the argument. And boy, don't I know about that in a great way. Just listen to one side of the argument, shut anything else off, and make up your mind based on a vacuum of facts. Well, I'm not going to sit back here and let these guys roll through unchecked. I guess I will be the self-appointed voice. If anybody else wants to get a show going, why don't you? And maybe we can do some crossover episodes. I need help out here. And if you're going to help at all on this show, and we're going to sign off pretty soon, you could go to iTunes and you could find Green Crush on there, and you could subscribe to it. That would be nice. And even better, you could leave a little message there telling iTunes how helpful it is that you've heard this show or you like this show, say something nice about us, And that would be nice for you to do. That would help us out without any money. Then we also have the Patreon situation. But it's not Patreon. I know we used to have that on a different show, but it's Patron now. And I've misplaced the damn thing because I'm all running this thing by myself in here today with a weakened soundboard. So I have to figure that out. Patron. Okay, so here we go. We've just got a late breaking news here. Hang on a second. Before I go to this, I do want to plug the show. I have not done that enough myself during this time to say, if you want to help us out, we are already at $55 of a desired $300 a month. That is not a lot of money to ask, but that actually literally keeps things going instead of finding ways to pay for it ourselves. And we have $55 a month. We are looking for slightly more than that. We are at 18% funded. And that's nice. We're on our way. So you can become a patron if you go to HTTP or HTTPS, depending, /patron, patron.podbean.com. That's the website anyway. And then you just put in Green Crush Pod after that. So it's patron.podbean.com/Green Crush Pod. And you can make a pledge there for $1 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month. Or you can hear comedian and stage 4 cancer survivor. I like to call it Victor, actually. It would be better. Alan Park talks about cannabis and more from his unique perspective. But don't we all have a unique perspective? So please go to patron.podbean.com and help us out there. You can even learn how to be a podcaster yourself by going there. So that's a pretty cool thing to check out. And we just have one more quick news item I do want to get off here. Danny has thrown it my way. I love this when this happens. He can find... I plan the show out so many times, and then the day of or the day before, we get so many pieces of news that we have to change the focus of the show. But I hope you will enjoy a great time at the end of the year with your family. And understand that from Cannabis News, that's at Cannabis News, Denver shuts down 26 legal cannabis businesses and makes arrests. Now, what the hell is this? Notice of suspension. Medical and or retail marijuana licenses for these premises have been suspended by the order of the Denver Department of Excise and Licenses for alleged violations of Colorado law. Wow. 26 legal cannabis businesses. I don't know what the story is there, but Leafly has that for us. Let's take a quick look before we sign off. Here we go. Come on, folks. Yeah, it says here that as of last Friday, authorities arrested 13 people in connection with raids on Sweet Leaf dispensaries. Police conducting the raids because Sweet Leaf employees were already allegedly selling customers more cannabis than allowed under state law, a practice called looping. State regulators have also suspended 26 of the company's cultivation, processing, and retail licenses. A hearing is expected within 30 days. None of the chain's co-owners were among those arrested, noting that most of the employees taken to custody were bud tenders or low-level employees. So even where it's legal, you're still going to run into some problems. And Denver and Colorado, far more free living and understanding than up here in Canada. So I pity this country if it goes down this same mistake-laden path. Because when Justin Trudeau is all done, somebody else a little more harsh might get into it, and that would suck. They take these existing laws and they make them even worse for their successor. Just like Justin followed in the old man Harper's footsteps. So I'm going to try to get this closing theme going, and we will try to get out of here. And this is going to be a bit of a juggle. I don't know if I can do that or not. There's me talking before. Just want to get to the part where I'm actually we can close this thing out with the theme song. If that's even possible, and if it's not, I might have to just disappear altogether in a cold exit, in a cold, wintry exit. Leaving you is not going to be easy to do here today, my goodness. So if you're still listening, God love you, and thank you very much. I'll tell you what, we're just going to eschew the theme altogether and move forward with a few good wishes for the year. We will be coming back on. We will be coming back on January 2nd.